Well, thanks, Ben. And I want to introduce an excellent panel that we have today because we have three corporate investors who are really quite experienced with dealing with startups at all stages and particularly making investments into the kind of tricky area of climate tech. And more importantly than that, actually kind of trying to do something constructive with those investments once they've made. So sort of try to foster those relationships with the parent company and so on. So to get into this, I am joined by Kendra Rauschenberger from Siemens Energy Ventures, Phoebe Wang from Amazon Climate Pledge Fund, and Vikas Gupta, who's from Shell Ventures. So obviously, three really huge corporations represented here. And I wanted to kind of kick off by getting you each to kind of tell us a little bit about how you are currently engaging with startups. I think there's a lot of myth and misconception sometimes about the relationship between big corporate investors and startups. And sometimes, that there's kind of a conception that, you don't really invest in very early stage startups and that, maybe this is just all a big lead up to an acquisition and so on. So let's kind of go through some of that myth busting. Anyway, so shall I start with you, Kendra, and just tell us a little bit about kind of what you're doing? I mean, Siemens Energy Ventures is really, really varied in how it kind of engages with startups.
Yeah, so thank you for having me go first. So when you look at who we are as a company, we are an integrated energy technology company that has its mission to really help accelerate the energy transition. Then it's been very clear that we need to find effective mechanisms to tap into the power of startups and really also provide our strength back to the startups so that we can really help commercialize and scale the technologies that are needed to get to net zero by 2050. And there's probably two things I wanna mention why this is important to us. So first of all, we know that 35% of emission reductions need to come from technologies that have not been commercialized yet. And secondly, you see disruptive technologies like Gen AI and quantum computing also starting to have an impact on how the energy systems operate today and will operate in the future. So for us, there's no question we need to be really good at working with startups to bring those innovations to life. And we basically do three things. We build our own startups. We have piloting and adoption program where we basically look to provide business impact to our business, but also at the same time help scale startups that can solve a problem for us. And that's mainly in digitalization, automation, robotics, cybersecurity, kind of tech, enabling technologies that are really, really important for us as a corporate. And then we also invest into startups that can help provide sustainable, affordable and reliable energy systems. So this is more the hard tech piece where we look at specific areas that for us is important to drive our corporate strategy into new emerging technologies and how to help them scale. So that's kind of how we do things. And it's been quite successful so far. So we've been piloting with more than 80 startups with about 40% going into commercial collaborations with us. And when you look at the investment piece, currently we have 5 portfolio companies, but the way we invest is a bit different maybe than other corporates do, where we not only bring capital, but also capability to really help the commercialization and scale up and get beyond the first of a kind challenge.
Okay, great. Well, no, thanks for that kind of overview, Kendra. We'll come back and kind of dig into some of those. But I mean, what I'm taking away from that is a really high rate of actually collaboration with the startups that you're investing in. So we sort of need to come back and see how you're doing it. But would love to move on to Phoebe. So Amazon is, one of the biggest funds out there in terms of if you count together all the different things that are going on with the climate fund, the industrial fund, and so on. But what about kind of if you were to speak to startups? I mean, are they just, how do you engage in the smaller end of that? Are you just kind of getting lost when you engage with such a behemoth as Amazon?
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me over here and honored to be on this stage. So everyone, on the Amazon Climate Pledge Fund, as many of you know, we are relatively young in terms of the years that we have been investing. But in terms of kind of companies that we are looking at, if you think about Amazon, we have over 100 subsidiaries. So there are a lot of different needs and wants from our business units. So that ranging from like a data center, AWS, right? You have large energy requirements. You also have like construction requirements. And all those have its implications of sustainability. And then ranging over to the retail, like the .com e-commerce. And then also like 2 years ago, we have acquired MGM. So now we have Amazon Studio. So there are a lot of different needs that we need to cater for from the Climate Pledge Fund to reduce their carbon footprint. So for the companies that we engage with, we actually try to consolidate them into like 5 different areas. So that includes like mobility, transportation, and then we do like a hugely in the energy side. There's also food and agriculture because we have Whole Foods, Amazon Fresh, and then we also do like a semiconductor for the data center needs, as well as the circularity. So there are a lot of different areas that we wanted the startups to be able to kind of reach out to us. Now, I might have mentioned that it's kind of a huge corporate, right? One thing that we want to avoid is to have a bear hug to the startups, and because we know that startups probably only have like 10 to 100 people, where like Amazon have 1.5 million people around the world. So that is why we have our Climate Pledge team to be around and to really kind of guide the startups through the process. Internally, we also have what we call kind of CTA, and it's really kind of focusing on our portfolio companies and help them to get engaged with different business units so that they can get into that commercial agreement that they want. They want to get into the piloting opportunities and potentially testing to show that they're able to get Amazon as one of the customers. So one of the examples that we can dive deeper later would be like Rivian, right? And then we have signed 100,000 vehicles when we first invested in them. And now you see the electric van delivering your package at your doorstep. So yeah, again, very happy to be here and happy to kind of share more about how we do things in Amazon and then the CVC in general.
Yeah, no, thanks for that, Phoebe. And I think it would be fun to dive into the Rivian case a little bit in a bit, because I think it shows what a kind of incredibly powerful customer, Amazon can be, and how that can really help scale up a company. But I guess one of the questions people will have is, how do you kind of go from A to B? So that's something to dive into. But let's move just briefly on to Vikas. So thanks for joining. You're representing Big Oil here. So obviously, a company that has, a lot to achieve in terms of trying to get to those net zero targets and so on. So I'd just be kind of interested, maybe if you could give us an overview of, sort of what are you looking for, and how does the company then engage with those startups that you're investing in?
Yeah, certainly. So Shell Ventures as an organization has been, I think from what I understand, the OG in the venture space, CVC space. Shell Ventures was there 1990s or so. At that time, we used to invest in the oil and gas space. But since 2012, Shell Ventures' direction has changed, and it's primarily focused on investing in decarbonization of the energy landscape. And we further look at decarbonization, to make it simple for us to understand, in 3 verticals. One is the industrial decarbonization space, which includes our own operations, our customers' operations. So this vertical includes carbon capture and sequestration, nature-based solutions, carbon trading, and other items to decarbonize industry. The second is decarbonizing transportation. So that includes electrification of ground transportation, as well as alternative fuels or sustainable aviation fuel for aviation, as well as for fuels or other options for marine transportation. In the same vertical, we have a large retail footprint. So Shell has more than 45,000 retail sites globally. So we look for innovation on how we use those sites for decarbonization, as well as for revenue potential. And then the third area where Shell has embarked upon is in the power landscape. Shell has minority interests in a few solar and wind development opportunities, but at the same time, it's one of the largest traders of electrons. So we look for innovation in those areas. In terms of collaborating with startups, Shell Ventures invests across Series A to Series E and F, so pretty early to pretty late stage. We also have a fund which we call SVX that invests in very early stage, seed stage investments. Those tend to be very technology heavy, less business model innovations, but more technology innovations. And thirdly, not part of Shell Ventures, but Shell has a program called Game Changer, which also invests in very early stage innovation that impacts the energy landscape.
Okay, so it sounds like there's lots of avenues actually for even very early stage, companies to kind of, work with you even before they perhaps have that sort of scaled up business model and maybe even a product, right? So there's opportunities.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then what about when they do have something that is sort of ready to start being used in a commercial sense? How often do you find that your startup, your portfolio companies then end up doing something with the parent corporation?
So I don't have the exact number that Kendra had. I think she mentioned 40%. I don't know what our number is, but we have a team in our ventures team, which we call the Shell Ventures Business Development Team. Every investment we make, we use them as part of the deal team to identify where in Shell that innovation could potentially be used or could help that innovation. So when we make the investment, that lens is already kind of used to justify the investment. There's a company called Exelos, which builds digital twins for wind turbines. We use them very heavily whenever we kind of bid on new projects for wind energy. That's a very strong relationship, and Shell is one of the largest customers for Exelos. This is the other example is Sonnen, which is again based in Europe. It's a residential battery storage company. Shell Energy in Europe used to use that on a regular basis to provide residential energy storage. So basically, I think if I have to guess, I would say at least 20 to 30% there's strong collaboration, and then the others, depending upon their stage, happen in the future.
So so I think that's a good message really for startups that are maybe looking to take that corporate investment, is that there really is kind of a pretty good path there for the startups to engage. I would love to turn back to Kendra now a little bit, just because I wanted to probe again. You also have kind of multiple ways. Again, for startups at different stages. So I just wondered whether you could talk a little bit about kind of a range of different things that you do, right from, accelerators and incubators, your own venture building, and so on.
Yeah. So I think when you look at particularly the investment piece, we do actually like to come in around Series A, Series B. And that's simply because we think we are a good investor at that stage, because we can bring capability. Once there is kind of a product that we can do something with and support the company in scaling up, particularly when it comes to first of a kind projects. But there's also many startups that we're working with that are basically not necessarily in Series A, but that provide a solution that is ready to test and pilot, where we get engaged. And the way we get engaged is really that our lead is a real problem in our business, that we have a business sponsor for that is ready to engage with the startup and also has budget actually to, engage, pay for the pilots and also take it into adoption. So I think the biggest shift we had in the last 3 years about how to make startup collaboration earlier stage also effective is to have a clear problem in the business, have a clear business case around what that solution could do to our company and our customers, and then really scout for the startups that provide those solutions. That's been super effective. That's why also I think we got the adoption rate around the 40%, which I think is quite strong for corporate like on our scale. But saying that, I think what's really, really important to us is also engage in the wider ecosystem, particularly when it's kind of pre-seed and seed companies. We are probably not going to invest at that stage. We might pilot if there's some kind of product that you can actually use. However, in that stage, it's much more important for us to actually build connections, build relationships, get to know the team. So this is where we basically collaborate with a lot of the climate tech incubators and accelerators to really understand like what's coming in the pipeline. How can we be helpful at that stage, which might not always be an investment, but which might be, coming in with a masterclass, coming in with explaining how to work with the corporate like Siemens Energy, bringing in some mentors from the business that can basically work with the founding teams to, really get unstuck on like specific topics. And I think this is value we can provide much better than investing at that stage. And I think for us, it was important to realize like where's our strength. And that's why we, I guess, have a different approach on those different stages. And so far, I think it works, but we are also still learning, right? I mean, any corporate, I think, in this environment is still kind of learning how to be better and how to be easy to work with. So that's really important for us as well, to continue to become better as a partner, as an investor, and as a customer at the end of the day.
But lots of startups might not realize that it's possible to kind of have lots of stages of that relationship that don't necessarily involve any money initially kind of changing hands, but it could just be being plugged into some other kind of help, which is good. I'd love to ask you now, Phoebe, just a little bit more, because we started talking about Rivian. Can you talk us through sort of in broad strokes how that kind of relationship developed from starting point? And
Yeah, so maybe I'll take Rivian as an example, but this definitely like you can apply to any of the companies, right? If you want to do a collaboration with a large corporate. So when we first look at what company that we want to invest, do we have this kind of top-down or thesis-driven? We would usually do a kind of internal inquiry to see what are the areas that has the largest CO2 debate. And we also want to see what are the technologies that can help us to get to that and what pathway that we can do. So for Rivian particularly, we know that Amazon, we have our fleets, we have our delivery. And it's also one of the top feedback that we got from the customers is that like our customers want to see us to be very forward thinking and be sustainable and contribute positively to the society. So when we were looking at that time, it was several years ago, right before the whole EV boom. So we identify like one of the companies, Rivian, as the top startups that we want to invest in, primarily for not only like they have the technology, they have really good management team, they have the talents over there, but also like they have this mentality that they are willing to work with Amazon and to cater for our needs. So there is a really good video like on our website. I would encourage people to look at it and see how the kind of the thinking behind it. But really, like when we first invested in the company, there's like startup being startups, right? They don't have huge factory, they don't have like running fleets to produce. But we have basically committed to say that we're going to acquire 100,000 of the vehicles in the coming years for Rivian to be able to deliver that and to work with Amazon to deliver our goods. And I think that has proven to be really powerful because one, having Amazon as your customer and on your customer list, right? And this is a lot of startups needed to work on basically is one, your customer pipeline, and two, your PO or purchase orders. So I think working with large companies like Amazon, like Siemens, like Shell would help you for that. Then two is like showing the willingness to work with large companies to deliver that. So we're pretty happy about the results. And I think you see Rivian cars driving around. I'm in Seattle. I see that all the time. And I think that's really positive. And right now we have over 30 companies in our portfolio. I would say like a vast majority of them have like collaborated in different forms with Amazon's business units. Many times they are collaborating with more than one, right? Because as I mentioned, we have so many different subsidiaries, different business units. Like if you're a battery storage company, if you're EV cars, if you're like aviation, even there are different business units that we can link to you or link the startups with. So that's also something that we're very proud for ourselves. And maybe lastly, I also want to mention about this kind of customer obsession, which is one of our leadership principles at Amazon. So from our fund perspective, we treat our startup CEOs and our external counterpart as our customers. So we are obsessed and delivering values to them and always thinking about how to make one, like for example, the process more streamlined, but also make their experience more meaningful working with us. And then also we want our startups to learn from some of the leadership principles that have been proven to bring Amazon where we are. So we also have Amazonians in residence, where we have leaders, top leaders that have been scaling business units or businesses from 0 to 1 or 1 to 1 million, and have them help our startup founders to get through that growth stage and scale up stage.
So what happens? Sort of behind the scenes, are you sort of dropping people in to kind of really intensely mentor the companies? Or I think you also mentioned that you sort of have people who are guiding them in their sort of initial interactions with business units. So is that kind of all a well-honed sort of program that you kind of crank into place?
Yeah, so the main program is actually, we have an internal team that do like internal business development for our for our startups. And then out of that program, there are different toolkits that they use, right? They can help our startups with like the PR, with the marketing, and then also with kind of procurement, and then working with our internal business units. But at the same time, there's Amazonians in residence as one of the like marquee program that my colleagues have been putting together. So these are like leaders, like they could be like director, vice president of Amazon that are leading the business units, and then seeing that kind of grow and have them help our startups. And obviously they're very busy. We are also mindful about their time. Startups are very busy too. So we want to make sure that this is a really good match. And then also it's a very curated discussions and have the pain point or like specific project that they're working with.
Okay, no, it's good to get the sort of inside view on that. And because I was wondering with you, I mean, again, you mentioned a couple of very successful examples of where you've gone to, work with a portfolio company. But I'm wondering whether you could speak to something which I'm sure is an issue for everybody on the panel, but just what are sort of common pain points or things that need to be you need to do some troubleshooting on when you're trying to get the startup from the stage of, okay, they're in the portfolio, they've got some investment, it looks kind of interesting, but what needs to kind of happen, or what should startups know about what needs to happen to get to that second stage of?
Yeah, I mean, we see that quite frequently. I think the biggest challenge happens is obviously startups move at a different velocity than big companies do. So their expectations on responses and getting things done are much faster than a big company like a Shell could do it. I think so. The way we've seen that the challenges have been that we want to have a collaboration. They want to sign the contract in a month. Shell has its own processes, which are justifiable because it's a big organization. So the way we try to address those is, as I mentioned, the business development team, we engage with the company much earlier, just at the investment stage. So if we know there is a collaboration agreement going to be happening imminently, we start that process early and have the right stakeholders in Shell informed about the investment that we are making, so that they can provide us the challenges that may be there for that collaboration agreement. So we address those proactively so that we find a good middle ground between the two, to have those collaborations happen. Obviously, Shell's risk appetite is different from a startup's risk appetite, and we'll never be the same. But we try to find the middle ground by collaborating and enabling that collaboration.
And I think are there I think I'd sort of like to ping this over to Kendra. Really, again, it's the same sort of question, but are there any kind of common pain points that happen when you're sort of trying to prepare maybe a startup that hasn't worked with a big corporation before?
Yeah, I think there are a few actually. Often we get approached by startups who kind of know Siemens and know a little bit about Siemens Energy, but they really have not done the work to understand how their solution can be a benefit to our company. And so I think one thing that's helpful for us if startups approach us is like, do your homework, understand how we operate. If you don't know, ask before you pitch, but really make clear how you think a collaboration can actually drive a mutual benefit. I think that's one thing that was really important to us. I think the speed topic that Vikas mentioned is also something we see, right? Like, how do you manage expectations between the big corporate and the startup that just moves at different pace? We have started to rewrite some of our processes So we get to a point where we can actually issue purchase orders to startups within like 3 weeks from initial contact to we want to do a pilot. But that's because we have done a lot of work with the business to understand the problem and the business case before we even engage with the startup, right? So, but that's been really helpful just to rewrite our own way of working to dance at the same tune. And then I think lastly, what's also important and helpful is we see a lot of startups kind of branching out to like many people inside Siemens Energy and try to get a hook in the door. Now we as a corporate have decided to run this a little bit more central to help actually the startup be faster. Because imagine if you're a startup and you try to find the right person in the company, there are so many avenues you can take. But if you actually channel this through a ventures team, that's kind of the door opener. Just like try to understand how the corporate operates and then respect those structures, because we're here to help. But it's really hard for us to help you if you're all over the place, right? And we want to make it effective. So let's be effective together. I think that's how we look at it.
And I wonder if I could address one sort of elephant in the room, really, if I can. And I'll start with you because I'm not picking on you just because you represent an oil company. But I just wanted to, the cynicism about whether big business is really, willing to change and take on these things. You're dealing with, some founders who may be very idealistic. I mean, how much do you come up against this idea of, oh, well, I don't necessarily believe that this collaboration is going to be helpful to, the startup, or if they have any reservations?
I thought that would be the case, but actually I'm surprised. I rarely come across that kind of pushback. I think everyone realizes that in the energy transition, you do need collaboration with large companies to make it happen. I actually can't think of any example where I've heard pushback that, hey, you're a big company, we don't want to talk to you. In fact, I think it's an asset that when I see something interesting and I say I'm from Shell, I get the response right away. It's actually the opposite than what you would imagine.
Okay, so in fact, I mean, it sounds like in somewhat times they just want to go faster than you're even able to. So
yeah, and I think I agree with Kendra. I think so. We have offices all over the world, so quite often entrepreneurs will hit our businesses all over the world, and so we're getting the same emails from 5 different locations. And that can kind of makes us feel that they are desperate and they're doing the right job in terms of trying to find the right person. But I think they should channel their contacts to the right geography, to the right people, understand the org structure better, and that will make them more effective.
Okay, so any startup watching this presentation, just spend that 5 minutes on the website and do some research into who you should be contacting. What about you, Phoebe? Is there ever pushback? Do you have startups who have some reservations about working with Amazon?
They haven't found that so far. I think people know that this is going to be is basically an existential problem, right? We need to have every stakeholders and every force that we can find. So I would say that so far, if we're looking at all the companies that we have been engaging, all the feedbacks are pretty positive. And that is also the reason why we have the climate pledge. It is not only Amazon, we also have almost 500 signatories, which include like HP, Unilever, P&G, large companies, as well as small companies, to march towards the common goal, which we're going to be like net zero by 2040. So that's I think everyone knows it's going to be taking everyone's effort for us to reach that goal.
And then I guess same question to you. I mean, Kendra, ever any pushback about the sort of big company aspect of this?
I don't think in collaborations we've seen this either. But I don't want to talk it away, right? I mean, there's been so many research that's been done on the fact that collaborations between corporates and startups are rarely successful. And we are quite conscious about this. So we really try to, as I said before, learn how to become a better partner, learn how to become easier to work with, learn how to tailor our process so that it actually makes sense to enter into collaborations with startups. So I think from where we are standing, I think there's a lot of potential around us, and probably there will always be startups and also business side teams where it just doesn't click, right? Because at the end of the day, it's not only the solution that we are after, but also we want to work long term together. So there also needs to be some kind of cultural fit. And I think that happens, but in the majority, we are really, really looking forward to unleashing each other's potential and really making a big dent in the energy transition together.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of food for thought there. And I know we're coming to the close of our time, but I just wonder whether there's anything that, any final pieces of advice if somebody does want to kind of, if a startup wants to contact you, and I'll just, if we whiz through really quickly, but, advice, have from anything, how to contact you or how to pitch, or, if you start us off, because.
As I said, I think just look at the organization and find the right person. Ideally, I mean, even though we are corporates, I think cold calling usually doesn't work. It's best to either meet the investor in person or find somebody who knows you and get an introduction if you want to get our attention. We get inundated with too many LinkedIn requests, and then after a while, we kind of forget who had reached out from there. So that would be my advice if you want to reach out to us.
So sort of similar roles to other VC approaches, no different from that, do your research. Phoebe, any advice for someone looking to engage with Amazon?
Yeah, I think definitely do the homework, right? I think Amazon publish our kind of newsletter, and we have our blog, so definitely look into that. So I also give out a lot of information about what we are looking at and events that we're going. So feel free to kind of connect me on LinkedIn or follow me on that. And then I think the third piece is really kind of doing homework, understand how is the strategic angle for your startup with Amazon or with other corporations, and then find the right person to connect with.
And what about you, Kendra? Is there other ways where a startup can check kind of what you're, with whether they'd be a good fit for you? I mean,
yeah, I think, as my two peers are saying, there's company websites and contacts that, of course, is worth checking. I think the one thing I would say is put your startup solution into the context of a problem of the corporate or the customers of the corporate, because that, I think, makes it much more relatable and understandable why you think this is actually a good fit. And going back to Phoebe's words, do your homework. It's really, really helpful to understand the context of the problem space and then latch onto it, as opposed to just pitching the solution, because there's so many out there. I want to know, how can you help me solve a problem? And in order for you to say that, you need to understand my business. So I think that's really critical for us.
Okay, well, I think we're going to have to probably end it there, but I think I would just summarize this by saying that I think what might surprise a lot of people is just how many resources there are, in corporates and corporate venture units, really, to kind of help. There's a sort of relatively high attach rate in terms of the number of portfolio companies that then go on to have some kind of relationship with the corporate. So if that's what you want, this is definitely a good route to look at. And, I think as everyone on the panel has kind of indicated, there's a lot more humility and willingness to learn and willingness to kind of be adaptive to startup needs than I think is commonly understood. I think people look at large corporations and think it's this wall, this impenetrable, and that's going to come with sort of a certain amount of arrogance. I rarely find that to be the case. I think when I speak to corporate investors, they're always kind of looking at how they can make their offering really appealing. So I think there's that. But I think also on the flip side, I think, as people have indicated on the panel, you do need to do a bit of research, because not everything is going to be the right fit. It might not be the right time. Might not be the right solution. And the other thing I would say, writing about corporate venturing day in, day out, is no two corporate venture units are the same. There are probably somewhere upwards of 2,000 in the world, and every single one of them has a slightly different, flavor of how they operate. So do a little bit of reading around. That would be my advice. But thank you very much to all of the panel for kind of illuminating that. And I hope that's been useful for everyone.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.